Her family sold her as infertile, but an Alpha King gave her a child and loved her. Elara shivered as the carriage rocked along the uneven forest path. The winter wind whipped her hair across her pale face, and she pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. The forest seemed alive with whispers, each gust of wind carrying a soft hiss of secrets she could not understand.
For years, she had carried the shame her family had given her, a mark that they called a curse. Infertile, they had said, as if her worth depended on something beyond her control.
And now, sold to a distant noble court, she had nowhere to turn, no one to trust, only the shadow of her own heart as company. Her mind drifted back to the day her family had decided she was worthless. She was only 5 when her parents had whispered harsh words in the cold morning light, their eyes hard and unfeeling. "She is defective," her father had said.
"She cannot carry our name."
Her mother had not argued. She simply nodded and allowed the decision to be made.
That day, Elara's world had shrunk. She had learned early that love could be taken away with a single word. Now, as the carriage rattled along the frozen road, Elara felt the bitter weight of that memory settle in her chest. She had learned to hide, to obey quietly, and to hold her grief deep within her heart.
She had learned to survive, but survival felt empty without hope. The journey took 3 days, and during that time, Elara saw nothing but snow-covered trees, misty hills, and the occasional dark figure of a traveler or hunter disappearing into the distance. She had heard rumors of the Alpha King who ruled the northern lands, a man whose name struck fear and awe into all who whispered it. Kalen. They said he was ruthless, commanding armies and bending magic to his will. They said he was as beautiful as he was dangerous, with eyes that seemed to see into the soul and a voice that could demand obedience with a single word. Elara had not believed in such stories.
Kings were kings, nothing more.
Yet even in her disbelief, her heart could not help but tremble at the thought of him. She had been raised to fear power, to bow to it, but something in her whispered that meeting Kalen would change everything. The carriage finally reached the gates of the palace as the sun sank beneath the horizon, painting the snow in shades of gold and crimson. Guards clad in silver and black armor lined the walls, their faces hidden behind masks, their spears gleaming in the fading light. The gates opened slowly as if the palace itself were testing her courage. Elara stepped out, her boots crunching in the fresh snow. Her breath came in small, misty clouds as she followed the guards through a maze of corridors and courtyards. The palace smelled of burning wood, polished stone, and something faintly metallic, the scent of power. She had never seen anything so grand. The ceiling stretched high, adorned with intricate carvings of mythical beasts, and tapestries of kings and queens long dead hung on the walls. Every step she took echoed through the halls, reminding her how small she was in a world that demanded obedience. Then she saw him. Kalen stood at the end of a long hallway, his figure framed by the glow of torches. Even from a distance, he commanded attention. His dark hair fell just past his shoulders, and his eyes, sharp and storm-colored, seemed to pierce through the walls of the palace and through her. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and every movement was deliberate, precise, as though the world itself moved to his rhythm. Elara felt her knees weaken. For the first time in her life, fear mingled with something unfamiliar. Curiosity. He did not speak at first, only watched, letting the silence stretch between them. She did not know what she expected, kindness perhaps, or immediate judgment, but the intensity of his gaze unsettled her more than any word could. Finally Kalen spoke, his voice deep and commanding, yet with an undercurrent of intrigue. "You are Elara," he said, stepping closer.
"The one they say cannot bear life. Come forward!"
Elara hesitated.
Every instinct screamed to flee, to hide, yet something in the way he said her name rooted her to the spot. She walked forward slowly, keeping her eyes fixed on the floor, trying not to let the rising tremor in her chest show. Kalen studied her, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Tell me," he said, "why should I care about what your family deemed you incapable of?" Her throat tightened. She opened her mouth, closed it, and finally whispered, I do not know, my lord. He let out a soft, almost imperceptible laugh, and it sent a shiver down her spine. Honesty, he said, is rare, yet it does not earn you favor here. He circled her slowly, like a predator studying prey, but there was no cruelty in his eyes, only an intensity that made her heart race. Perhaps there is more to you than they claimed.
Perhaps your family only feared what they could not understand. Alara's pulse quickened. Fear, confusion, and a strange spark of hope mixed inside her. She had spent her life believing herself broken. But this man, he seemed to see her differently, even if he masked it with questions that cut deeper than any blade. That night she was led to a modest chamber in the palace. The room was simple compared to the grandeur she had seen elsewhere, yet it smelled faintly of lavender and wood smoke. She closed the door behind her, leaning against it as if the weight of the day pressed her into the floor. She allowed herself one moment to cry, not just for what her family had taken from her, but for the strange, unsettling pull she felt toward the man who had spoken her name with such certainty. Days passed, and Kaelin continued to observe her from afar. He tested her patience and courage, sending her on errands that seemed trivial but were designed to measure her resolve. He watched her reaction to court intrigue, noting how she remained calm when others panicked, how she spoke truth even when it was dangerous. Each small victory over fear, each act of quiet defiance, seemed to draw him closer to her. Elara, in turn, struggled with conflicting emotions. She despised that she cared so much about a man who could destroy her with a word. She hated that his approval felt more valuable than her own peace. Yet she could not deny the flicker of warmth in her chest when he looked at her not as a servant, not as a failure, but as someone worthy of notice. One evening, as snow fell heavily outside the palace walls, Kaelin summoned her to the library. The room was vast, filled with towering shelves of ancient tomes. Firelight danced across the walls, casting shadows that seemed to twist and breathe with life. Kaelin stood by a window, looking out at the storm, his expression unreadable. Elara, he said without turning, you carry a burden no one should bear alone. Tell me, do you resent your family? She hesitated. Few had asked her that without accusation or judgment.
I do, she admitted softly. They said I was broken.
They said I could not fulfill what was expected of me. And then they sold me, as though I were nothing. Kaelin turned then, and his storm-colored eyes met hers. There was no mockery there, only something she could not name. A recognition of pain, a mirror of loss. They were cruel, he said quietly. And yet, here you are. Alive! Still standing. That alone makes you stronger than most who wear crowns or wield power. Elara felt heat rise to her cheeks. His words were not gentle flattery, but acknowledgement, and it struck her more deeply than any kindness she had known. You are different from them, he continued. You see the world in ways they never could, and that is both dangerous and rare. Do you understand what I mean? She nodded, unsure if she did, but sensing the weight of his gaze. It was as if he could see every hidden corner of her soul, every scar and every spark of hope she had buried. Kaelin stepped closer, the firelight flickering across his sharp features. I do not know what the future holds for you, he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. But I will see what lies beneath the curse your family branded you with. Or break you trying. The words sent a shiver through her body. Fear, excitement, and something deeper. A pulse of life she had not felt in years surged within her. She wanted to run, to hide, but she found herself rooted to the spot, drawn to him in a way that both terrified and exhilarated her. As she left the library that night, her mind whirling with his words, the storm outside mirrored the chaos inside her heart. She had been sold, discarded. Yet here, in the shadow of the Alpha King's palace, she felt the first flicker of a life she had never dared to imagine. A life where she might be seen, valued, and perhaps even loved.
and somewhere deep within she knew that nothing would ever be the same again.
Winter held the northern kingdom in its cold, silent grip. The palace gleamed under the weight of frost and snow, every spire and turret etched in icy white. Alara moved through the halls carefully, her boots soft against the polished stone floors.
The grandeur of the palace was intimidating, but the constant presence of the Alpha King, Kaelin, made her pulse quicken in ways she could not control. Since that first encounter in the library, Kaelin had watched her with an intensity that left her unsettled.
It was not mere curiosity or boredom. There was something more, something sharp, magnetic, that made her heart ache, even when she tried to ignore it.
She had learned to read the signs of power and danger in the court. Yet Kaelin was unlike anyone she had ever known. Every word he spoke carried authority, but sometimes, in fleeting moments, there was softness beneath the sharp edges.
Alara had been given tasks in the palace, small at first, organizing libraries, delivering messages, observing the courtiers, but she quickly realized that nothing here was truly small.
Every task tested her patience, her wits, and her courage. She learned who was loyal, who whispered lies, and who would use her as a pawn if given the chance.
One evening she was summoned to Kaelin's private chambers. She entered cautiously, the familiar warmth of the fire contrasting with the cold walls of the palace.
Kaelin stood by the window watching the snowfall, his hands clasped behind him. He did not turn immediately, and she waited, feeling the quiet tension coil around her like a serpent.
"Alara!" he said finally, his voice low and deliberate. "You have adapted well to this place. You move through the court with caution and courage, though you are still watched with suspicion." She lowered her eyes.
I try to do what is right, my lord.
"I do not wish to cause trouble." Kaelin's gaze softened ever so slightly. "Good intentions do not protect you in a place like this. You must understand power, its limits, and its dangers. You must learn to wield influence without exposing weakness."
Alara swallowed hard. The lessons were heavy, far heavier than any she had imagined when she first arrived, and yet, beneath the weight, she felt a spark, the faint thrill of being seen as capable even by the most feared man in the kingdom.
Days turned into weeks. Kaelin's attention was both a shield and a burden.
Courtiers whispered about her, some with envy, some with scorn. They called her the broken girl who walks beside the Alpha King, though none dared speak openly in his presence. Still, Alara felt the invisible chains of courtly expectation tighten around her. Every smile she gave had to be measured, every word carefully chosen. One night, while delivering a message to the Eastern Wing, she overheard voices in the shadows. A noble woman spoke in hushed tones, her words dripping with malice.
"The king is blind. That girl is cursed. She cannot bear life, yet he favors her above all. It is dangerous. The court will not stand for it."
Alara's heart pounded. She knew whispers carried weight here, and that danger often came disguised as loyalty. She slipped away, unseen, but the fear lingered like a shadow across her chest. She realized then that surviving this court would take more than courage. It would take cunning, understanding of power, and the ability to trust her instincts. Kaelin noticed the change in her almost immediately. During a late-night audience in the library, he studied her silently before speaking. "You heard them, did you?" he asked softly, though his eyes were sharp as knives. Alara nodded, unable to hide her fear.
I did, my lord. I know they plot against me." Kaelin's expression darkened. "Then you understand the stakes. Do not let them break you. You are stronger than you know. I will not allow harm to come to you."
Alara felt warmth in his words, but fear followed quickly.
His protection was not a gift easily won, nor was it without consequence.
She understood that being close to Kaelin meant walking a path where one misstep could be fatal, or worse, leave her heart shattered. As winter deepened, strange changes began within Alara. The warmth she had felt the night Kaelin first spoke of her destiny began to stir again, faint and elusive. A subtle glow in her veins, a pulse of life she could not explain. She hid it at first, afraid of what it might mean. But Kaelin, always perceptive, noticed. One evening, he summoned her to the royal gardens, illuminated by lanterns hung like stars among the snow-covered branches. He did not speak immediately, only watched her approach. "You feel it," he said at last, his voice low, certain. "Do not try to hide it. I see what stirs within you." Elara's breath caught. "I do not understand, my lord." "I am nothing special." Kaelin stepped closer, the firelight of the lanterns casting shadows across his face. "You are not nothing. Your family called you cursed, but it is not a curse. It is a gift of life and power. You carry something ancient in your blood, and it awakens now because you are near me."
Her heart raced.
I do not know what to do with it." "Then learn," he said simply.
"Learn and use it. It can protect you, and it can protect those you care for. But never let them see weakness. They will take advantage without hesitation." Elara nodded slowly, the weight of responsibility settling over her. For the first time, she felt the stirrings of hope. Perhaps she was not broken. Perhaps she was something more. Something powerful, dangerous, and yet capable of life. Their connection deepened in subtle ways. Kaelin did not demand her love or loyalty openly, but his presence was constant, his gaze filled with unspoken questions and recognition. Elara felt herself drawn to him even as she feared the intensity of her own emotions. There were stolen moments in the library, lingering looks in the corridors, and conversations by firelight that spoke of understanding, of shared pain, and of mutual fascination. Yet the court's dangers were never far away. One night, while walking through the halls, Elara encountered a group of nobles plotting against Kaelin. They spoke openly of her supposed curse, calling her a threat to the kingdom. She felt the sharp edge of fear pierced her chest but did not run. Instead, she listened, committing every detail to memory. Knowledge was power, she realized, and in a court such as this, survival depended on foresight. When Kaelin learned of the plot, he was both angered and impressed by her restraint. "You listened," he said quietly in the safety of his chambers. "Most would have fled or panicked." "You are learning fast." Elara looked down, unsure whether to feel proud or fearful. "I do not want to fail you," she whispered. Kaelin's eyes softened, a rare moment of vulnerability crossing his features. "You cannot fail me, Elara. You can only learn, and I will help you."
Their closeness grew, but always on the edge of restraint. Elara struggled with her feelings, both drawn to Kaelin's strength and terrified of losing herself in it.
And Kaelin, for all his power and control, found himself captivated by her resilience, by the way she faced fear without flinching, and by the light she carried despite her past. One cold evening, the northern winds howling outside the palace, Kaelin brought Elara to the highest tower. The city below was a grid of lights beneath the blanket of snow. He did not speak immediately, only let her take in the view. "Elara!" he said at last, his voice barely above the wind. "What you carry within you is not just magic, it is life. And soon, that life will grow. You will bear something no one thought possible." Her eyes widened. You mean a child?" Kaelin nodded, his gaze intense. "Yes, and you must understand this is both a blessing and a danger. Many will seek to harm what you carry, and some may try to use it to control you." Elara's chest tightened with fear and awe. The very thing that had once defined her as worthless, her inability to bear life, was transforming into her greatest power. She felt a surge of life stir within her, warm and strange, like a river awakening beneath the ice. Kaelin reached out, his hand brushing hers. "I will protect you," he said quietly. "And the child. No one will harm what belongs to me, to us. But you must be strong. Stronger than you have ever been." Elara's heart swelled with a mixture of fear, longing, and determination. For the first time,
she understood that she was not alone. That the Alpha King, feared by all, saw her not as broken, but as vital, as precious, as powerful, and yet the court remained a place of danger, of whispers and shadowed eyes.
Each day brought new challenges, new tests of courage and loyalty, and with each test the bond between her and Kaelin grew, a bond that promised both peril and hope, passion and restraint.
As she lay in her chamber that night, the snow falling thickly against the palace walls, Elara felt the faint pulse of life within her grow stronger. She did not yet understand the full extent of her power, nor the destiny that awaited her. But she knew, with a certainty that both thrilled and terrified her, that everything had changed. The girl who had once been sold as infertile was now carrying the spark of life that could alter the fate of the kingdom, and the heart of the Alpha King who had claimed her.
Winter deepened, and the northern winds carried an eerie stillness through the palace. Elara's world had changed entirely.
She walked with a quiet confidence now, aware of the life growing inside her and the power awakening within her bloodline. Yet the court remained a dangerous place where whispers could ignite treachery and a single misstep could bring ruin. Every step she took was measured, every word she spoke weighed. The tension around her was suffocating, yet it was a tension she had begun to navigate with care, until the night the shadows came closer than ever before. Kaelin had been unusually quiet that evening. His storm-colored eyes were sharper than usual, his movements precise, almost as though he anticipated unseen threats. He called Elara to the council hall under the pretense of reviewing winter supplies, but the air between them was thick with unspoken urgency.
"Elara," he said, his voice low and deliberate, "do you know who watches you in this palace?"
She shook her head. Fear prickled her skin.
I do not, my lord."
Kaelin's gaze was heavy, and he studied her with the intensity that had first terrified and intrigued her.
"Enemies move in silence. Courtiers, nobles, even those who smile to your face may plot behind your back. They fear what you carry. Your life and the life within you has drawn attention, not all of it good."
Elara's heart pounded. She had sensed unease in the palace for weeks, subtle glances, hushed whispers that froze her blood. Now Kaelin named it aloud. Danger was no longer a shadow. It was real, tangible, and closing in.
"Then what should I do?"
she asked, her voice trembling despite her efforts to remain calm. Kaelin's expression softened, almost imperceptibly.
"Trust in what you are becoming. The power in you is not just for survival, it is for protection. But you must learn to wield it, and I will be here to guide you." Guidance from Kaelin was both a comfort and a challenge. He did not coddle her.
He tested her, pushed her to confront fears and control the magic stirring inside her. In the library, he taught her to channel her energy, focusing on precision rather than force.
In the gardens, he had her practice in the moonlight, shaping the subtle warmth within her into protective barriers. Each session left her drained but more certain of her strength.
Yet, with the growth of her power, the court's jealousy intensified. One evening, while delivering a set of documents to the Eastern Wing, Elara overheard a secret meeting. A rival noblewoman, Lady Isolde, whispered harshly to her companions. "She carries the Alpha King's favor, and that child will be a threat to us all. We cannot allow her to rise.
If she succeeds, we lose influence, wealth, and perhaps our very lives. We must act before it is too late."
Elara's hands clenched around the papers she held. The danger was immediate, but panic did not overtake her. She had learned to observe, to listen, and to plan. Knowledge was her shield. She slipped away silently, heart hammering, mind racing with the implications.
Lady Isolde would move against her, and if the child, her child, were harmed, the consequences could be catastrophic.
Kaelin sensed her unease almost immediately. That night, he found her alone in the library, tracing her fingers across the spines of ancient tomes. "You have heard them," he said, not accusing, but simply stating.
Elara nodded. "Yes." "They plot against me, and the child."
Kaelin's jaw tightened.
Then you understand how urgent this is. You must not falter, Elara. Not for yourself, not for me, not for the life you carry. The palace is a battlefield, and knowledge is your first weapon.
Over the following days, the tension escalated. Courtiers who had once smiled at her now scowled, whispering as she passed. Guards watched her movements, some with loyalty, some with doubt. The magic within her grew stronger, responding to fear and danger with subtle pulses, like a heartbeat in her blood.
It demanded control, discipline she did not yet fully master.
One night, Kaelin summoned her to the Northern Tower, a place rarely used except in times of great importance. The storm outside pounded against the walls, and the firelight inside cast dancing shadows across Kaelin's sharp features. He moved closer to her, and she could feel the storm of emotion that always accompanied his presence. Power, authority, and an intensity she could neither resist nor fully understand.
Elara, he said, his voice almost a whisper over the howling wind. The time has come for you to face the full reality of your power. Not just for protection, but for survival. And not just yours alone. Her pulse quickened. Survival?
My lord, what do you mean? He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face, a gesture that sent warmth through her chest despite the cold storm raging outside.
You are not only carrying life, you are awakening forces older than this kingdom. Lady Isolde and her allies will try to manipulate what they do not understand.
And if they succeed, he paused, letting the weight of his words settle.
Then all of us, including the child, will be in grave danger.
Elara felt a chill, but beneath it, a fierce determination rose. She would not allow her family's betrayal or the court's jealousy to dictate her fate.
She would not allow herself to be powerless again. The following days became a test of endurance, cunning, and courage.
Elara practiced controlling her magic in secret, learning to shape its pulses, to focus it into barriers, to sense threats before they arrived. Kaelin guided her, pushing her, challenging her, demanding more than she believed she could give. Each night, she collapsed into exhaustion, yet each morning she rose stronger, more aware of her own resilience and the strength of the life within her. Meanwhile, the court's machinations grew bolder. One evening, as the palace slept under a blanket of frost and snow, Lady Isolde and a group of conspirators attempted to strike. They broke into the eastern wing where Elara had been studying her magic, intending to harm her and send a message to Kaelin. Elara sensed the intrusion instantly. A pulse in her blood, a warmth that flared like fire through her veins. She focused, shaping it into a barrier that shimmered with soft light. The intruders struck against it and recoiled, their surprise giving her the advantage. She moved with speed and precision, her fear transformed into controlled power. By the time Kaelin arrived, they were all subdued, caught by a combination of her magic and his formidable presence. Kaelin looked at her, stormy eyes softening in pride.
You did not just survive, Elara, he said quietly. You protected yourself and the child. You're stronger than even I imagined.
Tears of relief filled her eyes, but they were quickly replaced by a sharp awareness. The danger was far from over. Every act of courage would be met with a counter. Every display of power would draw attention. The court's envy and fear would not easily be quelled. That night, Kaelin held her close, their foreheads touching, breath mingling in the quiet warmth of his chambers. "You must know," he murmured, "I would sacrifice everything to keep you safe. But the world outside these walls is relentless."
You must be prepared, Elara, for the child and for the life you are destined to lead. Elara's heart ached with longing, fear, and an unfamiliar warmth. She leaned into him, finding comfort in his presence, and for the first time she allowed herself to imagine a future where she was not broken, where she was not alone.
And yet, a shadow lingered, a warning that the trials were far from over. Days later, she experienced the first true stirrings of the life growing within her. The pulse in her abdomen was stronger now, almost like a heartbeat of its own. She could feel the magic intertwining with it, protective and insistent. She knew the child was more than just life. It was a beacon, a force that could alter the fate of the kingdom in the hearts of all who dwelled within it. But with the awakening came danger. One night, Kaelin discovered evidence that Lady Isolde had not given up. She was gathering allies, spreading lies, and seeking ways to manipulate the child's emerging power. The palace became a web of threats and deceit, each shadow a potential enemy. Kaelin and Elara prepared for what was coming. They trained, strategized, and strengthened their bond. Yet even as they grew stronger together, Elara could not shake the fear that something might slip through their grasp, that in the court's endless intrigue, even her power might not be enough to protect the life she carried. The tension reached a breaking point when a messenger arrived bearing urgent news. Lady Isolde had allied with forces from outside the kingdom, plotting an attack that could not only harm the child but destabilize Kaelin's rule entirely. Elara felt a wave of panic and resolve wash over her.
The life she carried was no longer hidden or fragile. It was a force to be defended, a light that must survive at all costs.
And she knew that the Alpha King, for all his strength, needed her as much as she needed him. Together, they would face the coming storm. Cliffhanger! As the northern winds screamed through the palace, Elara stood at the tower window, feeling the life within her pulse like a drumbeat in the silence. Beyond the walls, forces gathered in shadow, plotting to take everything she and Kaelin held dear.
The court's betrayal and the dangers of the outside world pressed closer.
Elara realized with a mixture of fear and determination that soon they would be tested in ways she could not yet imagine. And the fate of the child, the kingdom, and their hearts hung in the balance. Winter's grip loosened slowly, and the first faint rays of spring sunlight touched the northern kingdom. Snow melted into silver streams that carved their way through the palace gardens. But the beauty of the season could not hide the tension that hung over the halls like a shadow. The court was restless, whispers of betrayal still lingering in every corridor. Outside the walls, Lady Isolde's allies had gathered, threatening to strike with both magic and steel. The kingdom teetered on the edge of chaos. Elara stood at the top of the eastern tower, the wind tugging at her cloak. Her hands rested lightly on her swollen abdomen, feeling the subtle movements of the life growing inside her. The pulse of magic within her was stronger than ever, entwined with the child in a rhythm that was both comforting and terrifying. She had learned to control it, shaping it into barriers and shields, sensing threats before they arrived. Yet the knowledge of the enemies waiting beyond the walls left her uneasy. Kaelin approached quietly, his long cloak trailing behind him, eyes dark with concern and determination. "The forces gather," he said softly, his hand brushing hers. "We cannot afford weakness, Elara. Not now." Elara nodded.
I know.
"But I am ready. We are ready." Her voice held conviction, though her heart still raced. She had grown in power, yes, but fear remained, not of herself, but for the child and for the life they were about to protect together. Kaelin took her hand in both of his touch grounding her.
"You carry more than life," he said quietly. "You carry hope, and that hope will guide us through the darkness."
The next days were a blur of preparation.
Soldiers trained, mages cast protective wards over the palace walls, and Elara practiced tirelessly, learning to merge her magic with the child's growing presence. Kaelin stayed close, both teacher and protector, guiding her through each step with patience and intensity.
Their bond, forged in shared trials, had grown unbreakable. Words of love were still rare between them, but the quiet gestures, a hand brushing hers, a look that lingered, a whispered promise, carried more weight than any declaration. But danger arrived sooner than they expected. One night, under the cloak of darkness, the outer gates were assaulted. Lady Isolde's allies moved like shadows, wielding both steel and dark magic. The palace erupted into chaos as alarms rang through the halls. Soldiers clashed with intruders, firelight flickered against the stone walls, and screams echoed in the distance. Elara stood at the center of the library, the pulse of magic thrumming in her veins, and she felt the life within her stir as if responding to the threat. Her hands glowed softly, forming a protective barrier that shimmered with light. The first wave of attackers struck against it and recoiled. She moved with precision, the training Kaelin had given her flowing naturally as if she and the child were one. Kaelin appeared beside her, his presence commanding and fierce. Together they faced the intruders, moving with a rhythm born of trust and shared purpose. Steel clashed, magic flared, and the palace became a battlefield. But through it all, Alara remained focused, channeling her energy into shields that protected not only herself, but the soldiers around her. In the heart of the chaos, Lady Isolde herself emerged, her dark magic crackling in the air. Her eyes met Alara's, and for a moment time seemed to stand still. "You are nothing but a child of chance," she hissed.
"The king's favor cannot protect you!"
Alara felt the warmth of life pulse stronger, a steady rhythm that filled her with courage. "I am more than what you believe," she said, her voice clear and unwavering.
"And I will protect this kingdom, this palace, and the life I carry." Magic and will clashed as the two women faced each other. Alara's power, honed through months of training and guided by Kaelin, met Isolde's dark energy head-on.
Sparks of light and shadow danced across the chamber, illuminating the fear and determination in every eye. Kaelin stayed close, lending strength and support, but it was Alara who took the lead, channeling the life within her into a protective force that none could break.
Finally, with a surge of energy, Alara's magic overwhelmed Isolde. The dark mage fell back, her allies retreating in fear.
Silence fell over the palace, broken only by the crackling of dying fires and the ragged breathing of those who had fought. Kaelin stepped forward, his storm-colored eyes softening as they found Alara.
"You did it," he said quietly, his hand resting on her cheek. "You protected everything we hold dear." Alara trembled, exhausted but triumphant. "We did it," she whispered. "Together." In the days that followed, the palace slowly returned to a fragile peace.
Lady Isolde and her remaining allies were imprisoned, their plots exposed. The court, once restless and suspicious, began to acknowledge the strength and courage of both Alara and Kaelin. Whispers of admiration replaced those of jealousy, and the palace walls seemed, for the first time in months, almost safe. But for Alara, the true test was yet to come. The life growing within her stirred more strongly with each passing day. She could feel it, a heartbeat in rhythm with her own, a force that was both vulnerable and powerful. Kaelin stayed by her side constantly, not as a guardian alone, but as a partner, sharing the responsibility, the fear, and the hope. One evening, as the sun set in shades of gold and crimson, Kaelin led her to the palace gardens. The air was warm for the first time since winter had arrived, and flowers peeked through the melting snow. He stopped beneath a blossoming tree, his eyes meeting hers with a depth that made her heart ache.
"Alara," he said softly, "you have grown stronger than I ever imagined. Not just in power, but in courage, in wisdom and love. I see now what I have always known, that you are not broken, but whole."
And the life you carry is a testament to that strength. Tears filled her eyes as she reached for him, her hand resting over his heart. "Kaelin, I was afraid of losing control, afraid of failing, afraid of the world outside these walls.
"But with you, I feel like I can face anything." He drew her close, their foreheads touching, breaths mingling. "You will face it," he said. "And we will face it together." "Nothing can break what we have built, Alara. Not court intrigue, not enemies, not even fate itself." The days turned into weeks. Alara's strength and control grew as the child moved within her.
Kaelin continued to teach and support her, their bond deepening with every shared challenge. The palace, once a place of fear and suspicion, became a home where trust and love could flourish, even amidst the lingering shadows of danger.
Finally, the day arrived when the life she carried could no longer remain hidden. In a chamber filled with warmth and light, surrounded by the protective wards she had learned to create, Alara felt the first true stirrings of birth.
Kaelin was at her side, holding her hand, his presence a steadying force in the storm of emotion and magic. The moment was intense, filled with fear, hope, and wonder. Elara focused, channeling every ounce of her energy, guided by the life within her and the strength Kaelin lent her. The palace walls seemed to pulse with magic, a rhythm of protection and love that extended beyond their immediate circle. And then, with a final surge, the child entered the world. A tiny heartbeat, a spark of life that radiated warmth and power, filled the chamber. Elara gasped, tears streaming down her face as she held the child close, feeling the pulse of magic intertwine with the small life in her arms. Kaelin knelt beside her, his storm-colored eyes glistening with emotion. "You did," he whispered, his voice choked.
You gave life, and together we have protected it. Elara looked up at him, her heart full.
"We did it," she said softly. "Together."
In the days that followed, the palace celebrated the new life, but Elara and Kaelin knew that their journey was far from over.
The child was a symbol of hope, a force that could shape the kingdom's future, but also a beacon that could draw new dangers. Yet they faced it together, bound by love, trust, and the trials they had endured. For the first time in her life, Elara felt truly whole. She had been sold as infertile, discarded by her family, and yet here she stood, powerful, loved, and a mother. The curse that had once defined her was transformed into strength, and the life she carried became the light that guided her and the Alpha King through the darkness. As dawn rose over the kingdom, painting the walls in gold and crimson, Kaelin held Elara and their child close.
Outside, the palace stirred with life, the court watching in awe at the courage and power of the woman who had once been called broken. And though shadows still lingered beyond the walls, Elara knew that together they could face anything, and that the legacy of love, courage, and life they had forged would endure.